This is the second video in our series on binding off stockinette stitch. And if you'll have reviewed the first video, you will hear me talk about the fact that stockinette stitch rolls. It is a characteristic of it. It's going to do it at the bottom edge. And if you don't do anything up here to mitigate the characteristics of stockinette stitch, it's going to continue to roll. One of the things that you can do is bind this off purlwise instead of knitwise. Knits all do this and curl towards you. Purls curl away. So one row of binding off purlwise will help balance out the need to curl. I'll show you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to begin by purling the first two stitches. I take the yarn to the back. It is an unnecessary step, but it helps me see that I'm not splitting the yarn. Pass the first stitch over the second, bring the yarn forward, purl the next stitch, take the yarn back, and you'll want to note that I am doing this loosely. If you don't know what I mean by loosely, I strongly suggest you go watch the first video again in this series because I talk about what loosely means or why it's important. I'm just going to continue going all the way across this 20 stitch swatch, purling one stitch and then passing one over, purling one and passing one over. Again, I like to take the yarn to the back because it enables me to be able to see better what I'm doing. It's not necessary, but if you leave the yarn in the front, it kind of just, it's in my way. I don't like it. It's your knitting. You do you, boo-boo. You'll also note that I try to keep my stitches close together on the needles rather than pulling them far apart. In the first video, I talked about how you end up with that loose stitch at the end of the bind off. And by keeping my stitches close to the regular tension that I used when I knitted the swatch, I'm going to keep them from dragging excess yarn to the end of the row. And when I finish, I don't have that dog-eared loose stitch at the end. I am going to, this time, just pull the tail through. It is a different way to finish off the bind off. If you look closely at it, this is what it looks like. This stitch, this last stitch, is not terribly secure. If I just pull the tail through it and cut this and don't weave it in very well, there is a possibility this could come back out and come back to haunt me later in life. So if it's something that isn't going to be seamed down or finished off in another way, this is not the way I recommend you finish it. Instead, I would take the last loop, make it a little larger, and pull the tail through it instead of just pulling the last stitch up. Here is our bind off, and to compare, this is the swatch from the first video where I bound off the stockinette stitch loosely, and here is the second. It has not totally removed the curl, but it does help counteract it, and that's because there is one little tiny row of purls that goes across the top of my knitting, and that helps it not curl as much because the purls tend to curl away from me and the knits curl towards you. So that is one way that you can help. There are more videos coming, so be sure to look for the others in the series.